The year is 1195. The Iberian Peninsula, a tapestry woven with threads of faith and conflict, stands divided. To the north, the Christian kingdoms cling to their hard-won territories. To the south, the Almohad Caliphate casts a long shadow, its armies a constant threat. Between them lies a volatile frontier, a land of skirmishes and shifting borders, where men like Pedro Fernandez de Castro, a knight of the Order of Santiago, stand guard. Pilgrims, driven by faith, journeyed along treacherous paths to Santiago de Compostela, seeking solace and divine grace at the shrine of St. James. Their passage was fraught with danger, not least from bandits and the ever-present threat of Almohad raiders who sought to plunder and sow terror. Abu Bakr ibn Zayd, a seasoned Almohad commander, led his men with ruthless efficiency. He saw the Christian kingdoms as an affront to Islam and viewed the Reconquista as a challenge to be met with unwavering resolve. His raids were swift and brutal, designed to weaken the enemy and strike fear into their hearts. The ambush was swift and merciless. The Almohad horsemen descended upon the unsuspecting pilgrims, their cries shattering the tranquility of the morning. Panic gripped the pilgrims as they scrambled for safety, their hopes of reaching Santiago threatened by the sudden violence. A horn sounded in the distance, a call to arms that shattered the stillness. Pedro Fernandez de Castro, ever vigilant, had anticipated such an attack. With a roar, he spurred his warhorse forward, his fellow knights of Santiago following close behind, their white habits a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. The battle was a whirlwind of steel and fury. The Knights of Santiago, seasoned warriors and devout monks, fought with unwavering courage, their faith a shield against fear. They met the Almohad raiders head-on, their swords clashing in a deadly dance of survival. While the knights fought, Brother Miguel de Zamora, a learned monk of the order, tended to the wounded. He offered comfort and solace, his gentle hands easing their pain. He was a reminder that even in the midst of war, compassion and mercy had a place. News of the raid reached Doña Araca López de Haro, a powerful noblewoman whose lands bordered the frontier. She understood the precariousness of their situation. The Almohad Caliphate was a constant threat, and she knew that the defense of her lands and her people depended on strength and vigilance. She began to prepare for the inevitable escalation of the conflict. That night Pedro knelt in prayer, seeking guidance and strength. He was a knight of Santiago, bound by oath to defend the faith, but the constant violence weighed heavily on his soul. He questioned the true meaning of his duty, the fine line between righteous war and senseless bloodshed. He knew difficult days lay ahead. Far to the south, Abu Bakr ibn Zayd watched the flames rise, his heart filled with zeal. He saw the raid as a victory, a sign of Allah's favor. He knew that the war for Iberia had only just begun, and he was determined to drive the Christians back into the sea, restoring the land to its rightful owners by the will of Allah. Doña Araca López de Haro, the Lady of Haro, was a force to be reckoned with in the fractured landscape of Christian Spain. Her lands were vast and fertile, her influence extending into the courts of kings and counts. More than just a landowner, she was a shrewd political player, adept at navigating the treacherous currents of alliance and betrayal. Her estate, a sprawling complex of farms, vineyards, and fortified buildings, served as both her home and the center of her power. Pedro Fernandez de Castro, Knight of Santiago, approached the Haro estate with a sense of urgency. The Almohad threat was growing, and the frontier defenses were stretched thin. He knew that Doña Araca's support was crucial to bolstering their defenses. She controlled key resources and strategic locations, and her alliance could make all the difference in the coming conflict. Doña Araca received Pedro in her audience hall, a grand chamber adorned with tapestries and heraldic banners. She listened intently as he outlined the dire situation, the growing strength of Abu Bakr's forces, and the urgent need for reinforcements and supplies. Her expression remained unreadable, her dark eyes assessing him with a keen intelligence. "Lady Araca," Pedro implored, his voice resonating with sincerity. "The Almohads do not distinguish between noble and peasant, Christian and Jew. They seek to impose their rule on all of Iberia. We must stand together, or we will all fall separately." He paused, letting his words sink in, hoping to sway her with the gravity of the situation. Brother Miguel de Zamora stood silently in a corner of the hall, his presence almost unnoticed. He observed the exchange between Pedro and Doña Araca with a worried expression. He understood the necessity of securing her support, but he also knew that alliances were often fraught with peril, and the pursuit of power could corrupt even the most righteous intentions. Doña Araca considered Pedro's words, her mind weighing the risks and benefits of an alliance. She knew that the Order of Santiago was a formidable fighting force, but they were also fiercely independent and sometimes prone to rash actions. She needed to be certain that Pedro was a leader she could trust, someone who could be relied upon to defend her lands and interests, not just his own. "Sir Knight," Doña Araca said, her voice firm and unwavering, "I will support your efforts, but not without conditions. I need guarantees that my lands will be protected, my people defended, and my authority respected. I will not be a mere pawn in your war against the Almohads." Pedro nodded in acceptance. He understood her concerns and respected her demands. He knew that any alliance had to be based on mutual trust and respect. "You have my word, Lady Araca," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "The Order of Santiago will honor your conditions and defend your lands as if they were our own." As Pedro and Doña Araca finalized their agreement, a shadow of political intrigue hung in the air. Araca glanced at one of her advisors, a silent understanding passing between them. There were other Christian lords in the region, some of whom might not welcome the alliance between the Order of Santiago and the Lady of Harrow. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, both from the Almohads and from within their own ranks. As Pedro rode away from the Harrow estate, he knew that the alliance with Doña Araca was only the first step. He had secured a vital ally, but the war was far from over. The Almohads were still a formidable threat, and the internal rivalries among the Christian kingdoms could prove to be just as dangerous. He steeled himself for the battles ahead, both on the battlefield and in the treacherous world of politics. In the monastery of Zamora, Brother Miguel wrestled with parchment and ink, attempting to reconcile the day's bloodshed with the scriptures he held dear. The justification for holy war seemed ever more fragile under the scrutiny of his discerning mind. Pedro, weary from patrol, sought solace and counsel from Brother Miguel. The weight of command and the constant violence pressed heavily on his soul. "Miguel," Pedro began, his voice rough, "I saw a village burn today. Women, children, all caught in the crossfire. Is this truly God's will?" Miguel sighed. "Pedro, the path of the righteous is rarely clear. We fight to defend our faith, to protect the innocent, but war is always a stain upon the soul." Pedro wrestled with his conscience. The order demanded unwavering faith, unquestioning obedience, but the images of the dead haunted his dreams. "There are whispers, Pedro," Miguel said, "that some within the order, their zeal is not entirely for God. Land, power, influence, these things can corrupt even the most devout." Pedro felt a chill run down his spine. He had always trusted the order, believed in its sacred mission, But Miguel's words sowed a seed of doubt. Read the scriptures, Pedro, pray for guidance, and trust your instincts. The truth, like God, is often hidden in plain sight. Pedro knew then that his path was about to become even more treacherous. He was not just a knight of Santiago, he was a guardian of its soul, and that duty demanded more than just blind faith. Leaving Miguel to his studies, Pedro stepped back into the cold night, the whispers of doubt echoing in his mind. The Reconquista was not just a war against the Almohads, it was a war within himself. From the sun-scorched lands of Al-Andalus, Abu Bakr ibn Zayd, a seasoned commander of the Almohad Caliphate, surveyed the Christian frontier. He saw not a border, but an opportunity to reclaim what he believed was rightfully theirs, land promised by Allah and stained by infidel presence. His heart burned with religious zeal and a desire to prove his loyalty to the Caliph. With a shout of Allah Akbar, Abu Bakr signaled the start of the raid. His Almohad warriors, hardened by years of desert warfare, spurred their horses forward. Their mission, to strike a blow against the Christian settlements, weaken their resolve and bring back valuable resources to the Caliphate. The village of Almodovar del Campo was a humble settlement, its inhabitants simple farmers and artisans. They lived a life of hard work and piety, their days dictated by the seasons and the rhythms of the land. They were ill-prepared for the fury that was about to descend upon them. The Almohad horsemen descended upon Almodovar like a swarm of locusts. Their war cries echoed through the valley as they rode through the village, their scimitars flashing in the sun. The villagers, caught completely off guard, offered little resistance. A desperate struggle ensued as the villagers tried to defend their homes and families. Men grabbed axes and pitchforks, women threw stones, but against the disciplined Almohad warriors, their efforts were futile. The village quickly became a scene of carnage. The Almohad soldiers, driven by their faith and the promise of spoils, showed little mercy. They cut down those who resisted and plundered homes. The village's meager defenses were quickly overwhelmed, the outcome inevitable. Abu Bakr watched the destruction unfold, his face betraying no emotion. He saw the raid as a necessary evil, a means to an end. The terror instilled would serve as a warning to other Christian settlements, a demonstration of the Caliphate's power. As the sun began to set, the Almohad warriors gathered their spoils and prepared to depart. They rounded up the surviving villagers, women and children, to be taken as slaves. The raid had been a success, but at a terrible cost to the inhabitants of Almodovar del Campo. With the captives and plunder in tow, Abu Bakr led his men back towards Al-Andalus, leaving behind a trail of smoke and devastation. He believed he was serving Allah, but the echoes of the screams and the images of the burning village would linger in his mind. The next morning, the sun rose over the smoldering ruins of Almodovar del Campo. The village was gone, its inhabitants either dead or enslaved. The Almohad raid had left an indelible scar on the land and its people, a stark reminder of the brutal realities of the Reconquista. Abu Bakr, his gaze fixed on the Christian fortress, meticulously planned the siege. The castle, a crucial point of defense, stood as an obstacle to Almohad expansion. He would starve them out if he had to. His honor demanded it. Pedro el Castellano watched as the Almohad banners appeared on the horizon. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach, but his resolve remained firm. He had faced sieges before. This castle would not fall easily. The siege began with a deafening roar. Trebuchets hurled massive stones, battering the castle walls. Almohad siege towers lumbered forward, threatening to breach the defenses. The air filled with the screams of men and the clang of steel. Pedro rallied his knights, his voice booming above the din of battle. He directed archers to rain arrows upon the attackers and positioned his men to repel any breaches in the wall. "For Santiago," he roared, inspiring courage in his weary defenders. In the castle's chapel, Brother Miguel tended to the wounded, his gentle hands offering solace amidst the carnage. He whispered prayers for the dying, wrestling with the moral weight of the conflict. Is this truly God's will? He wondered, his heart heavy with doubt. Meanwhile, in her fortified estate, Araka organized a supply caravan. Wagons laden with food, water, and weapons were prepared to relieve the besieged castle. She understood the strategic importance of the fortress and would not allow it to fall. Days turned into weeks. The castle's supplies dwindled and the defenders grew weary. Pedro, addressing his men, said, "We must hold. Araka will send aid. Have faith, brothers, have faith." The Almohads launched a desperate assault, attempting to scale the walls under the cover of darkness. A fierce battle erupted, steel clashing against steel, the air thick with the stench of blood and smoke. Christian soldiers poured boiling oil, killing their enemies quickly and gruesomely. Just as hope seemed lost, Araka arrived with her reinforcements. Her knights, clad in shining armor, charged into the Almohad lines, scattering the besiegers. The supply wagons brought much-needed provisions, replenishing the castle's dwindling stores. Abu Bakr, watching his forces retreat, felt a surge of fury. The Christian resolve had proven stronger than he anticipated. He vowed to return, to avenge his defeat, and to claim the land for the caliphate. For now, he would live to fight another day. Tensions simmered within the castle walls. While the Almohad siege was momentarily stalled, a different kind of threat was brewing. Whispers of discontent reached Pedro's ears, whispers fueled by envy and ambition. Doña Araka, ever vigilant, received reports of clandestine meetings among several Christian nobles. These were men who saw the Almohad threat as an opportunity to advance their own power, even if it meant weakening the common defense. The rival noble, Rodrigo de Lio, secretly plotted with disgruntled soldiers. He promised them lands and titles in exchange for undermining Pedro's command and weakening the castle's defenses. Pedro sensed a growing resistance to his orders. Small acts of sabotage, delayed supplies, misplaced equipment plagued the castle. He knew someone was working against him, but he couldn't pinpoint the source. Brother Miguel, observing the discord, felt a growing unease. He feared the internal conflict could prove more devastating than the Almohad siege. He knew he had to act as a voice of reason and unity. Araka, with her network of informants, confronted Rodrigo directly. She presented him with irrefutable evidence of his treachery, demanding an immediate end to his schemes. Rodrigo, exposed and facing the consequences of his actions, desperately tried to deny the accusations. But Araka's resolve was unshakable. She offered him a choice: public confession and exile, or face immediate execution. Araka informed Pedro of Rodrigo's treachery. Pedro, though angered by the betrayal, recognized the urgency of the situation. He knew they had to act swiftly to repair the damage and restore unity among the defenders. Brother Miguel led a service of repentance and reconciliation. He spoke of the importance of forgiveness and unity, reminding everyone that their strength lay in their shared faith and common purpose. With the treachery exposed and dealt with, a fragile peace returned to the castle. But the Almohad threat remained, a constant reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The stage was set for a renewed struggle, where faith, loyalty, and courage would be tested once more. The scream still echoed in Miguel's ears, even within the monastery's thick stone walls. The siege had been broken, yes, but at what cost? He stared at the illuminated manuscript before him, the vibrant colors mocking the grim reality he had witnessed. Was this truly God's will, this endless cycle of violence and retribution? He sought solace in prayer, but the familiar words felt hollow, insufficient. "Lord, guide me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Is this holy war or merely human ambition disguised as piety? Show me the path to righteousness, even if it leads away from the sword." Miguel sought out Pedro, hoping the knight's unwavering faith could offer some guidance. "Pedro," he began, his voice hesitant, "I struggle to reconcile the teachings of Christ with the bloodshed we inflict in his name. Is there no other way?" Pedro sighed, running a hand through his short hair. "Brother, I understand your turmoil, but we are sworn to defend these lands, to protect the pilgrims and the faithful. If we do not fight, who will? Sometimes the sword is the only language our enemies understand." Driven by his conscience, Miguel approached Doña Urraca. "My lady," he pleaded, "surely there is a path to peace, a way to negotiate a truce with Abu Bakr. Must we continue this endless war?" Urraca regarded him with a shrewd gaze. "Brother Miguel, your compassion is admirable, but your understanding of the world is limited. Abu Bakr seeks not peace, but dominion. He will only negotiate from a position of strength, a strength we must demonstrate on the battlefield." Undeterred, Miguel resolved to try anyway. He secured a white flag and, with a heavy heart, rode towards the Almohad lines, hoping against hope that reason might prevail. Abu Bakr watched the approaching figure with suspicion. A monk bearing a flag of truce, he signaled his men to stand ready. This could be a trap, a ruse to weaken their defenses. "Commander Abu Bakr," Miguel announced, his voice carrying across the dusty plain, "I come bearing not arms but a plea for peace. Let us end this bloodshed and find a way to coexist in this land." Abu Bakr's eyes narrowed. "Peace? There can be no peace until the banner of Islam flies over every fortress in Iberia. Return to your masters, monk, and tell them that only submission will bring an end to this war." The fragile hope Miguel carried flickered and died, leaving him with the bitter taste of failure. Days bled into weeks under the relentless Almohad siege. Food was dwindling, morale plummeting. Pedro knew a desperate gamble was their only chance. He planned a sortie to break through the lines and secure supplies from a nearby village, a mission fraught with peril. Under the cover of darkness before dawn, Pedro led his chosen knights, a small but elite force, through the Sally Port. The initial charge took the Almohads by surprise, scattering their lines, but Abu Bakr had anticipated such a move. Abu Bakr, ever vigilant, had anticipated such a desperate move. He had positioned a reserve force, hidden from view, ready to cut off the Christian sortie and turn their retreat into a slaughter. The sortie turned into a desperate melee. Pedro fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion, his sword a whirlwind of steel, but the Almohads were too many. They were surrounded, the odds overwhelmingly against them. A young knight, barely a man, fell beside Pedro, a fatal wound tearing through his armor. He was one of Pedro's squires, a boy full of dreams and valor, now extinguished in the brutal reality of war. His death hit Pedro hard. With a heavy heart, Pedro gave the young knight the last rites. There was nothing more he could do. The sortie had failed. He ordered a retreat, knowing they had paid a terrible price for their desperation. Just as hope seemed to dwindle completely, a sight appeared on the horizon: Doña Urraca, riding at the head of a contingent of reinforcements. Her arrival lifted the spirits of the besieged, but Pedro knew it was not enough. "We lost good men, Doña Urraca," Pedro said, his voice heavy with regret. "And we gain nothing. The siege holds and our situation is dire." Urraca listened, her face grim. She understood the weight of Pedro's burden, the crushing responsibility of command. "We will find a way, Pedro," she said firmly. "We must." In the chapel, Brother Miguel prayed for solace, for guidance. The cost of war was etched on the faces of the survivors, a grim reminder of the price of loyalty and the heavy burden of faith. He wondered if God truly favored one side over another, or if all were simply pawns in a game beyond their understanding. The dawn broke blood-red, painting the plains of Alarcos with the promise of a brutal day. Pedro, astride his destrier, felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. Before him, the Almohad banners rippled in the wind, an endless sea of green threatening to engulf the Christian lines. From the Almohad side, Abu Bakr addressed his warriors. His words, sharp and fervent, echoed across the field, stirring the hearts of his men with religious zeal. He spoke of paradise, of victory, and of the glory of Allah, promising a swift and decisive end to the Christian presence in the region. The Christian lines surged forward, a wave of steel and faith crashing against the Almohad ranks. Pedro, at the head of the Order of Santiago, led the charge, his battle cry a defiant roar against the enemy's fervor. The ground trembled beneath the hooves of horses and the weight of armored men. Abu Bakr countered with a rain of arrows, his archers unleashing a volley that thinned the Christian ranks. The Almohad infantry, a wall of shields and spears, stood firm, repelling the initial Christian assault. The battle became a brutal melee, a dance of death under the scorching sun. Pedro fought with the fury of a man possessed, his sword a blur of silver as he cut down Almohad soldiers. He carved a path through the enemy ranks, his white habit stained with blood, his faith a burning flame in his heart. Abu Bakr, witnessing his lines begin to waver, rallied his troops with a thunderous cry. He spurred his horse forward, his scimitar flashing in the sun, a beacon of defiance against the Christian advance. The battle hung in the balance, the outcome uncertain. Pedro and Abu Bakr met in the heart of the battlefield, their eyes locking in a silent acknowledgement of the deadly dance to come. Steel clashed against steel as they engaged in single combat, the fate of the battle resting on their shoulders. Abu Bakr fought with the skill and ferocity of a seasoned warrior, his scimitar deflecting Pedro's blows with practiced ease. He pressed his attack, seeking to exploit any weakness in the Christian knight's defense. The air crackled with tension as the two warriors battled for supremacy. With a final, desperate lunge, Pedro disarmed Abu Bakr, his sword poised to strike the final blow. The Almohad commander stood defenseless, his fate hanging in the balance. A hush fell over the battlefield as all eyes turned to witness the outcome of the duel. Pedro lowered his sword. The battle's momentum shifted. Seeing their commander fall, the Almohad lines faltered, then broke. The Christians surged forward, driving the enemy from the field. Victory, hard won and dearly bought, belonged to the Order of Santiago. The clash of faiths had ended, for now, with Christian steel triumphant. The stench of smoke and death hung heavy in the air. Alarcos, once a symbol of Christian strength, was now a testament to the brutal cost of war. Pedro walked through the rubble, his heart heavy with the loss of his comrades. Urraca, ever the pragmatist, focused on the immediate needs of her people. Food, shelter, and medicine were paramount. She worked tirelessly, ensuring that the survivors received the aid they desperately needed. Miguel moved among the wounded, offering comfort and tending to their injuries. The horrors he had witnessed weighed heavily on his soul, fueling his determination to find a path towards healing and reconciliation. Far from the ravaged fields of Alarcos, Abu Bakr offered his prayers. Victory had come at a cost, and he knew that the conflict was far from over. He vowed to continue the fight, driven by his unwavering faith and the desire to expand the caliphate's influence. Pedro met with Araca to discuss the reconstruction of Alarcos. They agreed that the fortress needed to be stronger than before, a bulwark against future Almohad incursions. The work would be long and arduous, but they were determined to rebuild. Araca, ever the astute politician, navigated the complex web of alliances and rivalries. She secured funding and support for the rebuilding efforts, solidifying her position as a key player in the region. Miguel sought understanding through dialogue. He met with Muslim scholars, seeking common ground and exploring the shared values of their faiths. He believed that peace could only be achieved through mutual respect and understanding. Pedro wrestled with his own faith. The violence he had witnessed had shaken him to his core. He sought guidance from God, questioning the true meaning of his sacred duty. Abu Bakr watched as the Christian kingdom slowly recovered. He knew that the Reconquista was a long and arduous process, and he was prepared to dedicate his life to the defense of Al-Andalus. Pedro, his faith renewed, stood ready to defend the frontier once more. The Order of Santiago would continue its sacred duty, a beacon of hope in a land scarred by conflict. The Reconquista would continue, and the fate of Spain remained uncertain, but the spirit of resilience and the pursuit of peace would endure.